Hello and welcome to the World Wanders podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the World Wanders podcast. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by you, the listeners of the show. For those of you who have listened to the show for a while, you've probably heard these ads a couple of different times and ways. And something that we're really excited about is having this Patreon page, which is this platform where you're able to support us with just a small amount of money, and we're able to give back to you in a bigger way than just the podcast. So by joining our community on Patreon, you get cool things like one-on-one hangouts with Ryan and I, postcards from exotic places around the world, and much more. So if you want to join, head on over to patreon.com/The World Wanders. Thanks so much for your support.
If you're listening to this before Tuesday, June the 27th, we have a hangout with Peter Niger happening that evening where we will talk about bike touring. He's ridden his bike across 30-something states in America and back and forth 2 times. Bike touring, living an unconventional life, travel, and all sorts of stuff. That'll be Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time.
9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
So if you go onto the World Wanders Facebook page, you will find more information about that. And we've been doing these hangouts every Tuesday during June, and going forward, we will be doing them every other week. And we'll have topics like traveling with kids and other things like that. So make sure to connect with us on Facebook or on our website, and you can find out more information about it there.
Yeah, and if there's anything that you really feel like you would love to hear about or a conversation you'd love to join that we're not having, definitely just reach out to us. Let us know. We're doing these to connect with listeners of the show, to meet you guys, and to help you plan your trips and learn more about travel and the things that you're interested in. So if there's something you're particularly interested in, just send us an email, info@theworldwanders.com.
And these are super conversationally based. They're not like a webinar. It's more of a hangout. So you have the opportunity to ask a bunch of questions, talk to people, and really get your questions answered, and not just be a passive listener or observer.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So on to today's episode of the podcast. What are we talking about today, Rai?
Today we are talking about Taiwan.
Yeah. And so if you haven't listened to last week's episode of the podcast, this one kind of goes hand in hand with it, because last week we talked about whether or not expectations could influence your experiences, and how for us, we've really found that they do. And Taiwan was a really, really clear example of that for us, and kind of what inspired last week's episode of the podcast.
Yeah. And so by no means required listening, but would add some context to this episode. This episode, we're going to really focus in, though, on our time in Taiwan, things we did there, and if you're someone who's interested in going, you're going to get a lot of value out of this episode.
Yeah, definitely. So I think we should start with kind of context. Why did we go to Taiwan?
So we went for a couple of reasons. We'd heard a number of good things about Taiwan from people who had lived there. So that kind of got us intrigued, got our mouths watering. And then we were going to Japan. We knew Japan was too expensive for us to stay long term, but we wanted to go somewhere after. So we were like, okay, Japan, right by Taiwan. We eventually found out that flights from Korea home were cheap back to Canada. So it was just a jumping off point to go from Japan to Taiwan and then to Korea. And our focus for Taiwan was really to get back on track in terms of work and responsibilities. During our time in Japan, we were traveling with friends for 3 weeks and really had done a lot of work in advance to make sure we had a lot of free time, and took it more of like vacation time or travel focused. And then so during Taiwan, we planned to really settle in and get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah, that was the plan. So we decided to base ourselves out of Taipei, which is where we were flying into, and we found a nice looking Airbnb where we decided to stay for, a couple weeks. We were thinking maybe upwards of a month there. And we had heard really good things about Taiwan from all of our friends who had been. And a couple different people who we knew who lived there and that sort of thing. So we were pretty excited about going there. I think we were sad to leave Japan, but we were also excited to get to Taiwan because we'd heard all these great things. And I think that that's where the conversation from last week came in. And we're not going to repeat that conversation, of course, but I think it's important to touch on how we came into Taiwan with expectations that Taiwan was going to be awesome. We arrived and our first impressions were not awesome. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say I had an expectation that it was going to be awesome. But yeah, it wasn't in line with what it was.
Well, what was your expectation then?
I don't know. We're just going to find a great place to be, and it was going to be a bit more affordable, a bit nicer, and a good place to be productive.
Right.
And so our first interactions with Taipei, and this is something you find if you go, watch a travel show or read other blogs. Taipei is not the most aesthetically pleasing city. There's a lot of square, somewhat depressing looking apartment buildings with bars over the window. Everything looks like it's run down except for a very few number of modern buildings, which are going up more and more. But for a country that's got such a high GDP per capita, you would kind of expect it to be a bit more shiny and new, especially compared to some of the other growing, developing places in Asia. So we got into Taipei, and this was after a long night of sleeping in the Tokyo airport, a long time getting through immigration, and a long train ride to our apartment, which was still pretty good. It was a very small studio apartment that had kind of lofted a bed above the small little kitchen bathroom area. But it's much smaller than we expected. One of those places where the photos look really nice, but when you get in there, you start to see there's actually the kitchen sink's broken, it kind of smells, there's noise from construction, etc., etc. Kind of
there's mosquitoes.
wears on you a little bit, and we'd booked in for a longer period of time. So we got there and we had just visions of Japan in our mind, constantly comparing, and just spent a day or two feeling a bit glum.
Yeah, definitely a day or two. I thought you were going to say a week or two because I feel like it kind of took a while to sort of adjust to Taiwan. And Taiwan isn't one of those places that has a massive running to-do list of things that you have to see to experience the city, which was something that we were actually looking forward to after spending time being go, go, go in Japan. We were excited to check out a cool city and to try some new food and to kind of just be able to explore in a really leisurely way while getting a lot of stuff done.
And so the place we booked to stay originally was in the Zhongshan area of town, which is actually across the river from downtown up towards closer to a popular area called Shilin, which is where the Shilin night market is.
I love your pronunciations.
My Chinese is very, very good. Mm-hmm. I've got all the best Chinese words. So although Taipei doesn't have a ton of spectacular sights to see, there's lots of stuff to do, especially around night markets, food, places to go eat. But something that was a bit challenging for us was that the area we're in was connected by a metro line, but it was not one of the main lines. And so it would take almost 30 to 45 minutes to go anywhere in town.
I would say at least 30 minutes. And normally everywhere we looked up, it's like, oh, we should go do this. And it's like, oh, it's going to take us 45 minutes to get there.
Yeah, Taipei is one of those cities where, although it has a metro, when you look on Google Maps and see the time it takes to take the metro compared to the time it takes to walk, it's actually unless you happen to be right beside a stop and you're going direct and don't have to transfer, it's often around a similar time if you're going within a reasonable distance. Some of the times on the metro or the buses are long. The buses are pretty good. They can usually get you from point A to point B with less walking, because the trains you often have to transfer and there's long walks within the stations. But the buses are notoriously late, and as we found out, a little bit sketchy as well.
Yeah, the first bus that we took, I almost lost my arm to the door. So I don't know, be warned. But I think we took more buses than we took trains during our first stint in Taipei.
Yeah, and one thing that we didn't take advantage of, but was an option in Taipei, was to take the bikes they have. So like a lot of cities, there's bike points where you can hop on a bike and take it somewhere. In Taipei, if you've got one of the cards, I believe they're actually free. You just have to register, which would be a great way to get around the city, especially if you're only there for a few days.
Yeah, definitely. And it's an enjoyable way to see the city. And there's tons of biking trails along the river. There's a river that runs kind of through Taipei, I guess you could say. And there's biking trails that just go for ages there, which is awesome.
So although there aren't a ton of must-sees, like what's on like the standard list, and then what did we actually like?
Yeah, so the Shilin night market.
I'm going to say Shilin.
Shilin night market.
Like chillin'.
Yeah. So there are night markets all over Taipei, and you could go to any of them. I think have a pretty authentic Taiwanese experience, but the Shilin night market is the biggest and most famous one, and we were staying quite close to it, just a 25-minute bus ride. So we hopped on over to that one. And night markets in Taipei are very interesting because Taipei is known for some interesting scented food. You get the scent of stinky tofu, which smells very gross, as you might guess from the name of it. And then you also get things like clams baked with cheese, and they're famous for these like fried chicken patty things, kind of like a breaded chicken thing that comes in a napkin or like a piece of paper. So we didn't try that, and we didn't try the stinky tofu, but the scents of those are very overpowering. So you arrive at the night market and your nose is just like accosted by all these smells. And that's kind of what I think of when I think of that night market.
Yeah, but it is definitely one of the top things to do in Taiwan, to get out and try the food. And I think that's something that is going to affect how much you enjoy it too. If you're someone who's very adventurous food-wise and really enjoys that part of travel and getting out and eating street food and trying new things, I think you're going to really have a good time there because there's a lot of options. But some of them are pretty far out there. There's a lot of weird stuff going on.
Yeah, octopus and squid and all sorts of goodies that are happening. But there are some really yummy things that you can find in there too. The scallion pancake is a really good option at the night market. It's delicious. That's probably what I would recommend of the things that we did try. And yeah, just going to a night market is an enjoyable experience and a good way to see kind of how, the locals, like what the locals do. And then something else that is really popular is Taipei 101. For a long time, it was the tallest building in the world, and it sticks out far above the other buildings in Taipei.
I think it was a brief period of time.
A brief period of time, not a long period of time?
Very, very short period of time.
Okay. It's kind of like a tacky building, I would say. It's not, I don't know. It's not really beautiful. It's kind of just tacky and sticks out, but I think that it's really cool to go to. We went and saw it close up. We went up it. The view of Taiwan is really nice, of Taipei. Taipei is surrounded by mountains, very lush green mountains. And it's really cool to be able to see the city from all sides and to see the nature that's around there. And then we also went up Elephant Trail to the viewpoint to watch the sunset. And that was probably one of my favorite things that we did in Taipei. Yeah,
so if you go, it's usually something you can do together. Go check out Taipei 101 and then walk pretty close from there up to a small hill where you get a view back over the city and of Taipei 101, and you can see the sunset.
Yeah, and the sunset was like purple and orange and pink. Like the whole sky was lit up in these really beautiful colors the day that we went. And I think that was probably one of the moments. I think it was in our first week or within our first 10 days. And it was a moment where I was like, okay, you know what? I think I'm warming up to this place. Cause I just kind of had a little bit of almost like a black cloud kind of sitting over over me around my feelings about Taiwan. And I was like, I just don't know about this place. Like, it's probably one of my least favorite places I've been in Asia. And then I saw that sunset, and it kind of convinced me to open myself up to what Taiwan had to offer. And I feel like our trip really turned around from that point.
Yeah, that point, and then also just getting a change of pace. So after a few weeks in Taipei, we went to Kaohsiung and then eventually came back to Taipei. And making that change up and coming back and staying in a different area of the city, somewhere where there was a lot more stuff going on, where it was a lot easier to walk out of our place and go find some cool places to eat or a good cafe to work at. That really changed up too and started making me feel a lot better about Taipei.
Yeah, and also just being closer to everything. It's like, oh, we want to go do this. Okay, it's only going to be 20 minutes to get there instead of 45 minutes. We were close to some of the major temples to go see. We were close to the Kaohsiung Memorial, which is something that has kind of a controversial history, but I think that it's definitely an interesting thing to see while you're in Taipei. And I mean, it sticks out when you're looking around at the city. So
yeah, I mean, it's gigantic. It's like on a very, very large scale.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I would definitely go check that out. And yeah, being close to all those cafes and cool little food stalls definitely did make a difference.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And I think that a big lesson from that for me was just something we've talked about and we've known and thought about too, but the neighborhood you choose to stay in can drastically influence your view and opinion of a city. And I think this is something that's like tricky about making judgments and receiving recommendations from friends about places, is if you go to a city and stay in the same place for 2 weeks, but you're in one neighborhood, you really don't have a good view of what that city's actually like. Even if you can like live somewhere and not really get to know places, but staying in a couple different neighborhoods gives you such a better perspective on it and can really completely turn around your views on somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
And sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that we knew that before. Like, we've had so many different times and places where it's like, you know what, maybe it's just worth a little bit more money to stay a little bit more centrally. But I feel like that was a very, very clear time as to, like, wow, this city is way better when we have access to better restaurants and we can go work at a cafe and we're not, cozied up inside this tiny little apartment, and we can just get to other places quicker because we had more incentive to go do things and it was more enjoyable.
Yeah. I definitely think probably worth at least like 50% more money because we were probably 50% happier.
Oh yeah.
And obviously not completely dependent on location. There's a lot of things that go into that and getting in a better perspective. But investing in location, I feel like, is a smart move when you're traveling. Yeah.
And so I want to talk about, that transition to that second place and what that time was like. But just before we do that, we took a trip to the national park that's right near Taiwan. And it's called Yangmingshan National Park. I think I pronounced that with a very great Chinese accent. And you can actually access this national park from one of the train stations that's right in Taipei. So you can just hop off the train, you hop onto a bus. There's a bunch of different buses that go up to numerous different trails. And, within 45 minutes, we were able to be in a national park hiking. And that was pretty amazing. I feel like for me, that was massive because I prefer nature to cities. And I found that I wasn't really enjoying Taipei, as we've kind of mentioned. And I felt like Taipei needed to be like power washed. Like, all the buildings just felt really dirty. Like, I was like, we need to like power wash this entire city and then it might be like a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. But getting out into nature, I mean, Taiwan is so lush and so beautiful. And I think that was another moment for me that really kind of turned around our time there.
Yeah, I think that's like the number one feature of Taiwan. Like, if you can get out and enjoy the nature there, then I think you'll have a really great time. And there's a ton of great hiking to do. Some of it's a little bit harder to access, but from Taipei, there's options on buses. The one thing, though, is we took that trip out to Yangmingshan on a weekend, which was crazy. We packed into a bus like sardines. So we were stuck in the middle of the aisle as old women were like shoving up against us. And it was an interesting adventure, but you get up there, you get dropped off, you start hiking, you get done your hike, hop back on a bus and get back down there into Taipei. So that was really good. Part of our time in Taipei.
Yeah. And so before we wrap up this portion of the episode, did you want to share your top 3 favorite things from Taipei?
Yeah. So I'm going to go number 1 and just put like a food thing. So 2 foods that I fell in love with in Taipei were the Jai Long Bao,
which is
the soup dumplings. So the restaurant Din Tai Fung, which you may have heard of, is from Taipei originally. You can actually go to the original location where it started, and it's now spread across the world. These are the dumplings that they are famous for, and we went to a Din Tai Fung and tried them there, but also had them at a couple of other places. And just the dumplings you can get in Taipei are amazing, and if you find the right place, also really cheap and delicious. And then the scallion pancakes, which you mentioned, are fantastic. We actually found a cool place near where we were staying that would kind of wrap them up, so you get these like beef wraps with, they put beef and plum sauce and wrap it up in a scallion pancake. That was fantastic. And the dumplings were amazing. So that would probably be the number 1 thing. You can, once you kind of decipher some of the food options and find a few you like, you can really enjoy those. Number 2 would probably be the Elephant Mountain by Taipei 101 for a sunset where you can watch the sunset over the city, take some amazing photos. That's great. And my 3rd thing about Taipei, I would probably say the Mao Kong gondola. But the national park would probably be on there as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so my top 3, definitely watching the sunset at Elephant Mountain over Taipei 101 for sure. The Mao Kong gondola, which is, you actually go right by the Taipei Zoo. So it's one of the last train stops. And then you pay just a small amount for this gondola. It's not too much money. And you ride the gondola up into the mountains. And when you get up there, there's kind of this like little village. And there's a bunch of different restaurants where you can have food or you can have traditional tea, and you can sit and just watch the sunset. And on a clear day, you'll get a beautiful view of Taipei 101 from afar. The mountains surrounding are just really, really beautiful. And that was one of my favorite things that we did. And what else did I really like? I think the national park would be my 3rd one. I really, really enjoyed going outside and just being able to experience the nature. And clearly we travel well together since we like all the same things.
What's number 4?
Number 4, I think going to the Shilin district.
Yeah.
It's kind of a little bit like Harajuku, Akihabara, a little bit if you know Japan. Just a little bit quirky. Has a bunch of shops and stalls and different restaurants. And at night it kind of comes alive, and there's a good bar scene, good beer scene. There's a lot of different places to drink and just enjoy yourself. So I think that that's just a cool neighborhood to go check out while you're in Taipei.
Yeah. And one other interesting thing about Taiwan in general is really big influence of basketball culture. So you'll walk around and see even like people you'd never expect to be wearing like fancy sneakers, like, you know, your 40-year-old woman wearing like some nice Adidas basketball shoes and all this stuff. Everyone's really into sneakers. Basketball is really popular, but like fashion in general, like people are wearing like Yankee caps and all sorts of stuff. So it's kind of cool to walk around and see that. Yeah,
definitely. All right, so our second place of our trip to Taiwan was Kaohsiung, which looks like Kaohsiung
on a map,
but it's pronounced Kaohsiung, and it's more south in Taiwan. You can access it from the high-speed rail, which just takes about 2 hours. Really, really quick to do that, which is great.
And about $50.
Yeah, and it's about an hour and a half from Kenting, which is a really popular place for people to go in the south. So I think that Kaohsiung is kind of like the gateway to Kenting. We stepped off the train and people immediately pinned us as tourists, obviously. And we're Kenting, do you need the bus to Kenting? Do you want a taxi? And we were like, no, we're just staying here. And part of the reason that we went down to Kaohsiung is we'd heard it was cool, but then our friend Kirk also lives down there. Kirk is from Taiwan's Waterfalls, and he runs really cool waterfall expeditions and has a blog on waterfalls all around Taiwan. And so we went down there to see what he was up to, check out his city, and have a bit of a nature experience down there.
Yeah, so Kaohsiung, definitely not on the map for most people. Not a ton of stuff to do there either. It's a nice city though. It's right by the water. A bit warmer. There's more of like a palm tree, somewhat tropical feel to it. And we just found a central place to stay and used it because we were focusing on work. So going out to cafes, we found a really good restaurant called 2B Smoothie that would do all these customized and really cheap smoothies and customized and cheap salads. So we got our fill of vegetables after about a month without them, and really enjoyed that. And then we had a trip with Kirk where Kirk's done a pretty spectacular job on his blog of cataloging all the different waterfall excursions you can do in Taiwan. Not all of them. He's working his way there. And yeah, we went out on a trip with him to one probably about an hour and a half from Kaohsiung. Do you remember what it was called?
I don't remember what it was called, but we'll put the name of that waterfall in the show notes. It was quite an enjoyable day. And again, it was just nice to get out of the city. I mean, the air quality is not the greatest in the cities in Taiwan, and the nature is so nice. I can't say it enough. Like the mountains there are so spectacular because they're big, but they're very, very lush because Taiwan is very warm and it has quite a tropical feel to it. It doesn't really even snow there at all, even though it's like off the coast of China. And being able to, hop in Kirk's car and take a car away from the city was really, really nice. And we were able to have a traditional Taiwanese meal from a local village type place on our way back to the city, and able to just see some of the sites that were a little bit further out. Kaohsiung is where the giant Buddha in Taiwan is, and it takes a while to get there. Unfortunately, we were able to just drive by it and check it out, and it is very, very big. So that's definitely something that you could do while you were in Kaohsiung. What else did we do while we were there? We took a visit to Formosa Boulevard Station, which has kind of a picturesque stained glass type thing to take photos and check out.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a ton of note, but it's a good jumping off point to go to other places, and just a nice place to be.
Yeah, it's something that I really enjoyed that is kind of top of the list for things to do is the dragon and tiger pagodas on the Lotus Pond. So it's just this big pond. You can walk all the way around, and they have these really big pagodas that are shaped like dragons and tigers. And that was one of my highlights for Kaohsiung for sure.
And so you probably get the sense from us talking about it that it might not be the top of your list if you're doing a 2-week trip to Taiwan. And I'd say that's probably fair. Kaohsiung is a place where I feel like if we were going to Taiwan and going to teach English, I'd probably be open to going there for a while. It's not as international as Taipei, but there's still a bunch of Starbuckses. There's still, a Mexican restaurant. You can still get healthy food around. It's right by the ocean, and it has close access to nature. So it seems like a nice place to live. If you're going down to Kenting, it's probably a decent place to stop for a night. But there isn't much in terms of like blow you away stuff happening there. Maybe other than like the big Buddha.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the dragon and tiger pagodas are cool, but yeah, I think that they're interesting and that they're worth a trip too. But, if you're in Taipei and you've got other things you want to see, then you could maybe just skip that. I think though, I did a lot of research on kind of like traditional loops around Taiwan. It seems like people do a lot of different things. The the Taraco Gorge, which is on the East Coast, which you can go to from Taipei, is really popular. So lots of people actually go down the East Coast, which takes longer. I guess it's more rugged. It's probably very beautiful to go that way. And then you get down to Kenting and you can come back up. And there's also a city in between Taipei and Kaohsiung that kind of is the branching part for the sun and moon pagodas, which is a popular tourist attraction. And lots of people that I read about had stayed there. So if you're listening to this and you feel like, oh, this isn't really stuff I want to do, there's definitely other things to do in Taiwan other than the things that we did in Taipei and Kaohsiung.
Isn't that obvious though?
Yeah, definitely. But I just feel like it should be stated.
Disclaimer.
Yeah, disclaimer. We didn't do everything to do.
They're allowed to do other things.
Yeah. Well, just, there's other things to do in Taiwan than what we did.
Yeah. So our trip was, we were really looking for a place where we could kind of settle in, be productive, and plus enjoy some new sights. And I think that Taiwan is... There's some parts about it that make it decent for that, but we were kind of just comparing it in our heads, obviously, to being in Japan and saying, well, this place isn't that much cheaper than Japan, and if we were just hanging out, I'd rather be in Japan. And also to Southeast Asia, where we were before, saying, if we were just focusing on work, we could have a much higher quality of life while spending the same amount of money in Southeast Asia. But we're feeling this money anxiety because we spent a bunch of money in Japan, and we're continuing to spend a bunch of money. And we've chosen to be here a long time. But that said, Taiwan has some amazing stuff to do. And if you were there for 3 weeks and really focused on getting out into nature and hiking, I think you'd have an amazing trip, especially contrast against the city, going out and doing some hiking, coming back into the city, hitting the street markets, eating some delicious food, and then going somewhere else. I think you could have an amazing time.
Yeah, definitely. I think it took us a little bit of time, but Taiwan definitely creeped into my heart slowly. And then I actually felt sad to leave at the end of our time there. But something I'd love to talk about with our time in Taiwan is Taiwan was month 8 of this trip that we had in Asia, this time away. And I feel like after our go time in Japan, I just hit a point where I was kind of burnt out. So it's although there was cool things people would tell us oh, this is really cool. It's looking at, how long it would take to get there, how much effort it would be. And there were a lot of points where I was it just doesn't really feel like I want to put the effort in. And I know that sounds really bad, and I'm grateful for the fact that I can be away from home and that we can work abroad and that sort of thing. But I think it's also important to be honest in the fact that when you travel long term, you can definitely get to a point where seeing and doing things feels like a lot of added effort.
Yeah, it reminds me when we interviewed Hunter Stanford a while ago, probably a year plus. And he was on month 9 of his trip through South America. And he was just kind of just kind of looking forward to getting home. And it was kind of weird for me then to hear his perspective on just having traveled for so long. But I feel like we got to that point. And a part of it too was going through this period of, there were some stressors in our life because we had spent a bunch of money in Japan, and because work stuff had kind of started to pile up a little bit. Not pile up in the way we had a bunch of stuff we need to do, but just you kind of start to feel this guilt because you're not investing time into it. So those two stressors combined with having been on the road for that long, I think we were experiencing some burnout.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's actually the first time I've experienced travel burnout. I remember talking to Hunter and just being I can't believe you're talking about wanting to go home and, not wanting to be in South America anymore. Because when we left South America, I was so I don't know, heartbroken to be leaving. And I just felt like I wasn't ready and all this stuff. And it's been interesting making the transition home now because people are oh, were you ready to come home? And I was yeah, I was ready. I was kind of ready a month ago, actually. And I mean, we had an amazing time in Taiwan in the end. And we had a great time in Korea, which we'll share with you on a different podcast episode, of course. But it definitely was this point of, oh, there's this thing to do. And I'm well, it looks kind of interesting. Like, it looks like something I might enjoy, but I just don't really feel like making the effort to do it. Just kind of feeling like over all of that added effort that comes with travel. Like, oh, we have to go like find somewhere to get food. And we don't have anywhere to stay. We need to book that. And okay, I guess we should go see something so we can like get this experience. And yeah, it's definitely an interesting experience to have. And it also, I felt a lot of, maybe not a lot, like definitely some guilt around it. You know, we've worked really hard to kind of like create the life that makes us happy. And I was like, why don't I want to be doing this right now? Like, I just want to, you know, sit at home and feel comfortable and like cook my own food and not have to worry about all this stuff. And I don't really want to do touristy stuff right now. So I think that was an interesting experience for us to have.
Yeah. And then something that I think was really helpful in kind of, I don't know, snapping us out of it a little bit was going back to Taipei and having a chance to meet up with a friend who we hadn't met in person.
No, we had. We'd met him once.
Oh, yeah. So Brock from an episode in the fall, if you've listened to that, he's Backpacker Brock is his blog. He does a great job on Snapchat. And a fellow travel blogger who we'd been in contact with, we were able to meet up in Taipei, and we actually shared an Airbnb together, and we were able to go out and explore the city a bit together. And that was a really fun experience. I think being around someone new and can give you that like push to try some new stuff that you maybe weren't doing, and have some interesting conversation, and it just really helped us kind of get past that little bit of travel burnout. Yeah,
and if you haven't listened to the episode with Brock, I mean, he's just like a daily dose of inspiration. He's very happy. He's very easygoing. He has a very positive outlook on life. And I mean, he was such a pleasure to chat with on the podcast, and he was like that in person as well. So it was really fun to, connect with somebody who kind of lives a similar life to us. He makes money online. He's fairly nomadic. He's on the road almost consistently. So he kind of understands all those things that we were going through and that we experienced, that a lot of people are like, hey, this is what you do. And that's always great. It's always nice to be with like-minded people. And then on top of that, it was really cool to see how he traveled that was different than us. And he is very brave when it comes to street food. And I feel like it kind of brought us a little bit out of our shells in Taiwan. And we ended up finding some really cool stuff that was really enjoyable to eat. And we checked out some fun sites with him. And yeah, definitely brought us back to life. I think that that's a great way to put it. And I think that it also ended our time in Taiwan on a really positive note, which was nice because we kind of came in, we had this sort of like meh beginning, kind of, turned up. We started to like Taipei. We enjoyed our time in the south, and then we came back to Taipei and really ended it on a positive note. And it left me feeling like, yeah, I would definitely recommend somebody to go to Taiwan. Like, I think that it's a really cool country with lots of unique things to offer. I mean, the history alone is interesting, but there's so much more than that too.
Yeah, and the history is fascinating. It's something I think it's a country that you don't really learn too much about, but the political situation there is fascinating. And when you go, it kind of provides this impetus to learn about it and learn about the relationship with China, and the kind of turmoil that Taiwan has been through. And then, one other point I want to touch on is just how, to talk about teaching English in Taiwan, because that is a popular reason people go there. It's not so much on the travel route for Asia, but, behind Korea and China, or in mainland China, it's a very popular place to go teach English. And I actually had a friend from home there who we were able to meet up with and go hiking with and hang out a few times. And we were able to meet quite a few teachers in Taiwan.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to talk to them about, what is it like to live in Taiwan versus visit Taiwan. And I think that Taiwan would be a very livable place. I mean, there's enough English that I think that you don't need to speak fluent Mandarin to get by. But then there's also this opportunity to learn this very international, worldwide language spoken by so many people.
Yeah, it'd be a wonderful place to go. If you want to learn Mandarin, yeah, that's a great place to go learn that.
Yeah, definitely. And then, a lot of most of the teaching contracts of people that we met seem to be like 20, 25 hours a week, and it's enough off of that one job to sustain yourself there. So once you find a place to live, not on Airbnb like we were booking, it seems like the cost of living you can keep pretty low. So that was really cool to hear. And it sounded like life is just fairly comfortable there. Like it's different enough from being in a country like Canada or the US or Australia, but it's not so different that it's totally overwhelming and uncomfortable constantly.
Yeah, and so if you want to teach English in Korea, you have to usually find a job in advance because the visa situation is a lot more stringent. China obviously is a bit more crazy generally, and then Taiwan, it seems like a pretty reasonable place where you can make a decent amount of money, enough that you can save and go travel in other parts of Asia, which is really only possible in China and Korea. In Southeast Asia, from my understanding, it's much harder to save money because the amount you're making is in local currency, which is enough to support yourself, but not really enough to go spend at other places. So you make enough to travel, you make enough to maybe save a bit. And also it's very feasible to come to Taiwan and then go find a job, make a visa run, come back, start working. But you don't make the same commitment like you do in Korea, where if you want to quit your job, you've got to leave the country. It's possible to leave your job, to find a new job, to find other opportunities. So it seems like a really good place to go if that's something you're interested in. I'd say it definitely should be on your radar as a place to go look into.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, we met a number of different teachers, and everyone we talked to had good things to say about what they were doing. So if you are out there listening and you're thinking about maybe taking a trip and you need to make money and you want to teach English, or you've been thinking about doing that, definitely consider Taiwan. It sounds like an amazing place to do that. Yeah,
it'd be a really cool place to go. Like if you want to spend 6 months and make some money teaching English and then also learn Mandarin. I feel like it would be a really cool opportunity. And the language is a bit different, but it obviously gives you a great foundation to learn the more mainland variety.
Yeah, definitely. Amazing. So do you have anything else that you want to talk about when it comes to our time in Taiwan?
No, I think we've covered it. We will have show notes up on our blog and a separate post about Taiwan.
Yeah, there's one about Kaohsiung as well that gives you more details on where we ate, what we did, where we stayed, etc.
And we have a guest post up from a friend, Philip Delvecchio, about the best street food to eat there. So you can use that to find your way into some good street food options without stumbling onto any mines. AKA stinky tofu.
Yeah, stinky tofu. Stay away from the stinky tofu unless you're super brave. But as always, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Ciao. To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers 1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.